guys, it's Lexi and welcome back to my channel. Enjoy the ambiance. It is very windy here in Las Vegas, so it's loud. My February wrap-up is kind of disappointing. I think last month was just not a good month of reads for me. I don't know if I just wasn't enjoying what I was reading or I just wasn't picking up books that I typically would like. The official count is only 8. I'm on my 9th one right now. It would have been finished, but I just could not finish it. I did have 2 5-star reads, so I'm just gonna go in order talking about all the books that I read. Most of these, as usual, were on my Kindle. I'm gonna power through this book that I'm reading right now. It's Quicksilver. It's another big fantasy, and then I'm taking a break from fantasy. I'm gonna stick with my mystery, thriller, fiction genre, and then re-enter that phase. The first book I finished was Do Not Disturb by Frida McFadden. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I said that it reminded me of like a Hitchcock movie, the Psycho movie, if that was put into a book. At first that's what I thought it was, and I was kind of annoyed because it didn't feel very creative. The twists and turns and the way Frida wrote it diverged from that Hitchcock theme. It's definitely still an influence, but you could kind of enjoy the individuality of it all. That was one of my more favorite reads of hers, but it was still only a 4-star because a lot of the plot points were unfortunately pretty predictable for me. But I still enjoyed it. And honestly, I could see that being turned into a movie. A lot of her books, which they are being turned into movies, I could see being turned into a movie or a TV series. And if I can't, then that's how I know it's not good. This one I feel like would be a really cool indie project, if that makes sense. The next one I finished was A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. I gave that one 4 stars, and then I wrote a note. It's actually a 4.5 for me. I'm using my book. The reason why I gave it 4.5 instead of 5 is because the first like half to 75% was kind of slow moving compared to my typical fast-paced plots. But with that being said, it was really unique. I've never read a story quite like it. And I noticed a lot of the reviews, like people are really hating on it, and I don't get it. I really fell in love with it, and I'm excited for the next one. It comes out in August. I thought it was beautifully written, and the books come with pretty splayed edges on it, so you can get really cute ones to decorate your bookshelves. It is a fantasy, but it's set in a modern world, and the fantasy is something that doesn't really play a big plot point until later in the book. So if you need something that's like really heavy on the magic to like keep you entertained, this probably won't be it for you. But if you like a good diversity, because there is romance in it, give this one a try. I promise you won't be disappointed if you're like me. The next book I read was The Psychopath Next Door by Mark Edwards. I ended up giving that one 5 stars, so it was my first 5-star read of February. And I was interested in this book because I saw an ad for it on Facebook. I got it on my Kindle and I ate it up. I finished that book in one day. Yeah, in one day, which is crazy because now I'm like taking a week to finish a book. Honestly, that was the beginning of the end for the month. I finished that one on the 7th. You're in the mindset of the killer and the victim, and you get to see both of their perspectives, and there's a win and a lose on both sides. It's not like a clear set, oh, the victim wins and the killer loses. Like there's a lot of juxtapositions to that, and I love a good mystery thriller where you're in the perspective of the villain and you don't know how everything's gonna play out yet. You're just like in the moment. I don't know if I'm explaining that efficiently, but that's one of my favorite, I forgot the word, shticks when it comes to mysteries. You know how like in romances there's the enemies to lovers shtick? I don't know what the right word is, but when I think of it, I'll insert it. That's my favorite when it comes to mysteries and thrillers, and this had it. And honestly, that's gonna get me hooked on Mark Edwards. That's kind of how it was for me with Frida McFadden. I picked up one book, instant 5-star. So now I'm very interested in seeing more of what he has to offer. The next one was Exquisite Ruin by Adrienne May. I put in a note that it started out as a 3-star read, but then it ended with a 4-star. And I think it's because most of the plot, it says it in the title, it's part of like this Labyrinth series, and I don't think the book has been released yet. Most of the plot is in a maze, so it's kind of boring. Not necessarily the storyline, but just nothing really changes. But the ending, the twist, I don't think I've read a fantasy with a twist that insane since Throne of Glass, in my opinion. I read it in like 2 days. There is some pretty heavy spice to it occasionally, and there's a lot of like dark overtones, and it's a Greek god fantasy. There's gods, goddesses, daemons involved, magic, and your main character has to hurt herself and like draw blood to access her power. And I haven't read anything where that was the way you access your magic, at least not very many of those, because one just came to my mind as I said it. Anyways, I really enjoyed that, so I'm looking forward to the next book, and when it is released, I have a feeling it's going to be pretty popular. I hope it is, because it's pretty. Anyway, the next book I read was The Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. It's part of a series. I gave that one 5 stars. I think I gave it a 5-star because, for one, it was the first fantasy book that I picked up in a while that I really loved and was like instantly enthralled in. I think it's because it was written pretty differently. I mean, of course, your main character is like that tortured guy who's like powers are dark and shadows and he's a king. It is kind of more graphic. It's a vampire-esque setting, so there's a lot of torture, fighting, and then when it gets to the spice, those canines are put to use. There is like a game that these characters enter to win and access a bunch of power and all that. So our girl enters the Kajari, and she tries to win it so she can win a bunch of powers, and it kind of has something that I'm seeing a lot nowadays in fantasy books, where there's some kind of game involved to win either power or something crazy. So there is that in this book. However, it's written pretty differently compared to, I think the last one I can remember reading like that was Lightlark, where all the kings and queens had a fight. This is where different vampire clans are sent to fight, and then they win, and then the goddess of night, Nyaxia, comes down and grants them power. Of course, a bunch of big twists happen, and our girl is the only human in a world full of vampires. How will she ever survive and not be turned into a victim? Well, I guess you'll find out. I wish I could explain this in a way that makes you understand why it's a 5-star, but I think for me it's because I haven't really read a vampire fantasy in a while or at all, so it felt very new and fresh for me. But if that's something you've been picking up back to back, it may not feel as 5-star worthy. The next one I read was The Crash by Freda McFadden. I gave that 3 stars. Honestly, now I probably wouldn't have even given it that much. It's her newer release this year. I put a note that 2.75 would have been better. This felt like, and I saw it in a lot of the comments, kind of like a cash grab. It just felt, I've been seeing a lot of people say about her lately that she puts quantity over quality, and at first I'm such a defender of her. I was like, oh, that's just rude, but now like I can kind of see it. The book itself was written fine. The grammar wasn't a problem and the descriptions weren't a problem. It was the plot line. It just felt very forced, like they were trying to make a mystery thriller out of this really weird situation with a girl who's pregnant and she kept calling her baby Tuna. I think that was like very cringy for me. So it just felt not as very thought through. It felt like a very rushed story, which I think is why the reviews are so low, and it was very anticipated, so it didn't quite live up to the hype of her other books. With that being said, I'm still gonna eat up every book that she puts out, or rather buy them, not necessarily eat them up, because I did not eat up The Crash. Oh, I remember too, I was really annoyed at the main girl because she just assumed that the big strong man must be the villain, and the woman who also partook in her endeavor in being captured, she must be innocent. Girl, please get over yourself. Obviously that's not the case. Anyways, I'm not gonna ramble on about that, just read it if you want to. The next one I read was The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, which is the second book in the Crowns of Nyaxia duology. Now, I feel like I can't talk about this one too much without giving away spoilers from what happened in the first one. I did give this book 4 stars. I remember one of the reasons I gave it a sort of lower rating was because a lot of the characters that ended up having big plot points in this book were very small side characters in the first one, and so a name would be dropped as some big bad villain, and I was like, who the heck are they? I don't remember this name. Okay, now I remember, but what do they do? Like, why are they important? And that was the case for like a handful of characters that became really big all of a sudden, so that confused me. I feel like if you're gonna build up to someone on the side becoming this big villain, the reader needs to be invested in their storyline, so it's more of a oh my gosh twist. And another thing is, I was a little confused by Aurea. Without spoiling, she forgives and forgets and then gets mad again over and over for something big that happens at the end of the first book. And I'm like, are you mad or are you not? Make up your mind. It felt very back and forth, and I just wanted her to settle on a decision because it felt like fluff to the storyline, her being angry and then her being forgiving. With that being said though, I feel like that's kind of the case with a lot of fantasy books nowadays, like reading Fourth Wing when Xaden and Violet were fighting in the second book, and you're like, oh my gosh, can y'all just make up or hate each other? Like, this whole back and forth nonsense kind of gets annoying. That was a piece in that book, but eventually, I mean, it ended mostly, so. The last one I read was The 7 Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I gave that one 4 stars. A lot of people gave it 5 stars, and I would have, because it was a very intriguing and different plot line, if it wasn't so incredibly predictable and also confusing. Because it kind of says it on the back, so it's not a spoiler to say she enters her aunt's apartment who passed away, and randomly it'll just go back in time 7 years. And 7 years ago, her aunt was away and some guy was living there, and so, you know, of course a romance buds. A lot of it didn't make sense to me. Like, for one, does it only work on certain people? Is the guy who she 7 years slipped back to visit, did he get to slip back? Is it only whoever lives there? I don't know. The ending was very like heartwarming. It was very comforting. But in some areas it just felt weird because she would be in the future, like the present, and she'd go visit him. He has no memory of her because... Wait, no, that's a lie. See, I'm confusing myself right now just thinking about it. So you can only imagine what it's like reading the book wondering, how does this work? But if you kind of forget about that and just focus on the love story, it's an easy 5-star read, but I have to nitpick every single little detail, which is what I just started doing now. But I really enjoyed so much about this. The romance was super sweet and lighthearted. The romance was, but the character was going through some heavy grief and like life-changing decisions, so that kind of balances the super sweet romance. Right now I am finishing Quicksilver. I wanted to be done in February. That did not happen, but also it's because I just started playing Baldur's Gate 3. I got bored with Hogwarts Legacy, so I've been locked onto that, which I'm probably gonna do right now. So it's not like I'm giving up reading for something boring. I'm playing a really interesting game. Anyways, I think later I'll need to film a video of me filling out my reading journal because I've been slacking. But I think that brings this video to an end. This was longer than you'd think it would be for 8 books, but I guess I had a lot to say because they're the reasons why I was in such a slump in February. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end of this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.